Here's some books that I've read recently or within the last 15 years or so that had a huge impact. And as you know, probably my favorite writer, the one who has stuck with me throughout all of these years, is Friedrich Nietzsche. I fell in love with the books of Nietzsche at a very early age. I believe I must have been 15. I believe it was Thus Spoke Zarathustra, a fantastic book. And a lot of times you have things that you love when you were a kid and they don't date well, and you kind of go, oh, God, what was I thinking? That's really stupid. That's gooey and sentimental, or that's a bad, simple ideas. But not Nietzsche, man. He always stays fresh, alive. It's always an adventure to read him. I always learn something. And one of my favorite books of his is a book that most people never read about, most people have never heard of. It's a book called The Gay Science. It comes from the French expression, the gay savoir, which in the Middle Ages was a form of the gay scientia, learning that was kind of happy learning, that was not this sense of learning that's kind of tight and constricted and boring, but learning about life and excitement and wisdom. And The Gay Science is a fantastic book. And the reason is it's early Nietzsche. Later in life, things sometimes got a little bit obsessive with him. But this is one of his books that he wrote early on. It's the book that has one of his most profound ideas of all time, which is the eternal recurrence, which is related to the concept of amor fati. And amor fati was actually created by Nietzsche himself, the idea which I and my Holiday have talked a lot about. So I highly recommend The Gay Science. It's a collection of aphorisms, of short little excerpts. You can pick and choose and read it at your will, but it's a great, great book. Hello, everyone. Today's video is being brought to you by Blinkist. It's an app that allows you to know the most important ideas from any kind of book. It has over 5,500 nonfiction titles and podcasts that you can access. Now, when I do research for a book, which is extremely important for any book that I write, I read hundreds, literally thousands of books. And I use Blinkist to help me go back and see the key moments in any of these books that I have read. So you can use Blinkist to access 6 of my titles: 48 Laws, The Art of Seduction, Mastery, Daily Laws, The Laws of Human Nature, and the 33 Strategies of War, as well as some of my favorite books, like The Prince by Machiavelli, and all of the great books by Ryan Holiday. It also has this thing called Blinkist Spaces, which is an incredible option. It allows you to create a space for family and friends where you can share and add and recommend all of the titles within that space. You don't even have to have a premium subscription. If you're in that space, you can access these titles. And if you're a premium member, you can create any kind of space that you want. Get a free 7-day trial and 20% off the Blinkist monthly premium by clicking the link in the descriptsun. Thank you, and now back to our video. The other thing I like, obviously, as someone who's interested in strategy, Sun Tzu's Art of War is very important to me, but a book that isn't read as much, although a lot of people have heard of, that I really recommend is the Book of 5 Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, perhaps the greatest Japanese samurai warrior who ever lived. Hey, sorry, my cat. I wrote about him in the 33 Strategies of War. I highly recommend reading those excerpts about him. He was this weird genius. He was like the Mozart of sword fighting. He was very creative. He was very eccentric, very weird. He wrote a book on strategy. And when you read it, at first glance, it looks to be like about swordsmanship. But no, it's not. It's about the shapes, the ideas of strategy in a kind of almost spiritual sense. These are the patterns that go on in life. This is how to have a warrior stance in any kind of encounter that you have, even in business. And in Japan, where he's from, the Book of 5 Rings is required reading for every businessman because it's the masterpiece of strategic learning. So that book is fantastic, and I highly recommend it. Another book. Well, I read a lot of biographies, and some biographies are really boring, and some biographies are really exciting and kind of bring history to another level. And if you want to read about one of perhaps the most evil person that ever lived in the history of mankind, and evil is fascinating, it's fascinating to all of us, the dark side, that character would be Joseph Stalin. And there's a biography, it's on my shelf, I believe the author is Boris Berezovsky, but we will confirm that for you, okay? It's a biography that came out, 30 years ago or so. And there have been biographies since, but nothing compares to this book. I believe it came out in the late 80s or early 90s when all this new information was just being divulged. It is the most terrifying read you can ever imagine of certainly the most evil, maniacal person who ever lived in the history of mankind. We often think... of Hitler, it's hard, you can't compare evil. It's on its own level. And Hitler is up there, obviously. He's certainly perhaps the most evil person. But Stalin is responsible for even more deaths than Hitler when it comes to the great famine that struck Ukraine in the early 1930s and all of the people that he executed in the gulags, etc. He is a monster, but he has a logic to him. He's a real person. He has a history, a biography. And all of it, some of it wasn't so bad. There's a reason behind it. But it is a fascinating, chilling read. We'll check, I believe it's just called Stalin. It's by Boris Berezovsky. Fantastic read. Another thing on the level of biography, because I want you to be interested in history. Because history is a subject that people don't read now anymore because we're so obsessed with our present, with the narcissism of our culture, where everything seems to be about who we are right now in 2023. And reading history gives you a sense of proportion of what was going on in the past and how different things were back then. And one of my favorite biographers that I think you absolutely have to read is the writer Stefan Zweig. He was an Austrian writer in the most active, I believe, in the 1920s, 30s. He was also a poet and a novelist, a brilliant man, creative. He wrote some of the best biographies ever. He wrote a biography of Fouché, which you've read. If you've read the 48 Laws of Power, you know this Talleyrand story about Fouché. But my favorite biography of his is his biography of Marie Antoinette. I believe it's just called Marie Antoinette. I've read it in French and I've read it in English. It is a fantastic book that will make that whole period of the French Revolution and prior to the French Revolution come to life. Stefan Zweig, is absolute required reading. Another on my list is a novel, because I think I love fiction at a very important part in my development. And perhaps one of my favorite novels ever is The Possessed by Fyodor Dostoevsky. It's sometimes translated as The Demons, but I prefer the old translation titled The Possessed. It is a fantastic book. It is, obviously you know that I am attracted to the dark side of human nature. This is an exploration of these anarchists, these revolutionaries in Russia in the 1860s. It's absolutely fascinating. These characters are unforgettable. You know, I still think about them. These really evil, amazing characters. Kirillov, the man who decided he would commit suicide at the age of 30 no matter what happened. And he lives his life knowing that he will commit suicide at this particular age, and sure enough he does. These weird Russian characters that just are like, whoa, what's going on here? That novel is absolutely one of the greatest novels ever written. I highly recommend it. I think I'm going to stop there because I'm at 5 and I could go on and on, but I will stop there. Those are 5 great books for you to nibble on in the next coming months.